Like many other writers, I've struggled with my fair share of imposter syndrome. The feeling that no matter how much I may enjoy writing or how much I feel like I may have grown in my writing, what I'm writing is not going to be worth reading. I'm either not smart enough, I'm not creative enough, perhaps I haven't read enough books. Whatever it is, I feel like an outsider. I've experienced that. I think every writer has experienced that. But right now, I feel like there's this new psychological hurdle that is facing writers, and it's what I'm going to call artificial imposter syndrome, or AI syndrome. This is the feeling that not only does my writing not stack up against other writers, it doesn't stack up against all of the AI writing that I see nowadays. And not only does my writing not stack up, me as a writer, I don't stack up to these large language models that have a much broader vocabulary than I'll ever have, are able to write infinitely faster than I ever could, and have this limitless amount of, call it inspiration, to draw upon to create. And what happens when you get this combination of regular old imposter syndrome with what I'm calling AI syndrome is this feeling that you're participating in a dying art form that you're not even competent in. So what do you do with that feeling? What do I do with that feeling? For a while, I could satisfy myself with the idea that my writing will always feel human enough. Maybe it's not great, but at least people will be able to tell that this was written by a human. And I'm realizing that I can't put all of my eggs in that basket. Already, it's hard enough to sometimes tell the difference between human writing and AI slop. There is obvious slop, but the slop is getting better, and I don't think that there's a reason to believe that it's going to plateau at a certain point. As pessimistic as it is, I would rather function under the belief that there will come a time, likely very soon, that there will be no easy way to tell the difference between AI and human writing. So living in this reality where you have imposter syndrome and AI syndrome and this world where AI writing and human writing may no longer be distinguishable, why write in the first place? Where is the hope in this craft? I'll tell you what I tell myself, and if this encourages at least one person, maybe this will be worth it. And this may not sound encouraging at first, but what I tell myself is that I'm only going to be here for a short while. I'm 30 years old, so at best, I'm maybe a third of the way through my life. And I realize that I don't want to look back on my life and realize that I offloaded the joy of human creativity and ultimately human connection to a machine, simply because it was too challenging for me to pursue on my own. And the more I've thought about this, the more I've come to believe that the joy of creativity and the joy of human connection are due in large part to the challenge it takes to experience them. I think if you remove the challenge of a creative process, there's often a certain amount of joy that gets stripped away with that. And there's a certain amount of challenge that I'm already okay stripping away. For instance, when I decide to write on a keyboard rather than pen and paper. But I'd also admit that there is some amount of joy that gets stripped away when I do that. There's a specific joy to the challenge of writing with pen and paper that there isn't typing on a keyboard. The leap from writing on pen and paper to writing on a keyboard is nowhere near the leap that we're now taking of simply thinking an idea, typing a few words into a prompt, and an entire story then being created for you. The challenge is minimal, and I would say that the joy that you get to experience from that is minimal as well. I think AI robs us of some amount of joy for every hurdle it takes away that we could have cleared on our own. If you get stuck on a certain story beat and you're not sure what your character needs to do next, and you go to AI to solve that problem for you, it's like if you've decided to run a marathon and at mile 13, you get really winded. So you call your friend and he comes and he runs miles 13, 14, and 15 for you. You jump back in and you finish the race. People are going to see you cross the finish line, but that does not mean that you ran that race. I think experiencing real joy in creativity, and in sports for that matter, requires persevering through challenges. Now, what some people could say, and I've heard this before, is, well, I experience more joy from the way that AI writes my stories for me. And if that's the case, then great, you've found some kind of joy. I would just say don't trick yourself into believing that it's your creativity that created that joy. You may have had the seed of a good human idea, but you've decided to water it with poison and plant it in soil that's not on your land, and now the tree that grows up from that may seem appealing on the surface, but there's nothing from you in it anymore. It's hollow. And this is where the joy of human connection comes into it for me. I want to be able to look back on my life and say, even in the face of Imposter Syndrome 2.0, in the face of AI, I was able to communicate as a human to other humans without offloading that responsibility to a machine. And perhaps that machine could communicate more effectively in some ways. Perhaps it would communicate with more polish. But I think there are many sacrifices that are made in that process of offloading. I think about all the times I've sat down to write a story or even just a letter to a loved one, and what I started out wanting to say or thinking I wanted to say is different from what I actually ended up writing. And the result of that is sometimes something far better. And so when you go to AI with that first 5% of an idea or a thought or an intention, you're robbing yourself of that process of working through your own feelings, thoughts, motives, and ideas. Just because it churns something out that you agree with doesn't mean that that's you. And again, I'd rather look back at my own writing and say, even if the words weren't perfect, they were 100% me. I think as writers, we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to die on mile 13, but know that we ran those miles with our own 2 feet? Or would we rather make it to mile 26.2, but always have to live with the fact that we cheated ourselves and others in the process? I feel like a Southern Baptist pastor giving all these sports analogies, but I feel like sports and human creativity deserve to be looked at in a somewhat similar way. Remove the challenge and you no longer have a sport. There's no spark without the friction. If you remove every human limitation, every human hurdle and human challenge, and then expect to get something on the other end that's uniquely you, you're lying to yourself. One of the most fundamental purposes of sports and human creativity is overcoming challenge. This isn't to say that we need to, suffer for our art, that it's only by being miserable that you can create something good or something beautiful. It's just the idea that if you strip away every challenge from the process, what you're left with is something that is maybe human-shaped, but there's no blood or bone or muscle underneath it. So even in the face of this new kind of imposter syndrome fueled by AI, I'm going to keep on writing. Not because I'm great at it, but because I'm not. Writing to me is this joyful challenge that I want to pursue. And even though it's going to be imperfect and slow, and before I die, I'm not going to finish everything that I set out to do. But at the other end of that pursuit, I really do believe that there's something far more truthful and worthwhile and human.